You and I are living in a day where you are watching the death of truth.
I can deliver you the truth, but the tone and the words that I select to convey my message matter more than what I'm actually telling you.
And I want to show you how sometimes the enemy doesn't sabotage your life with a lie. He tells you a truth, and he twists it.
One of the things I've been suggesting to my audiences, it's one of the rules in my book, is that you should tell the truth, or at least you shouldn't lie.
Pilate asked the question, what is truth? And truth, not facts. Facts are not necessarily the truth. They're the best we know at the time.
All right, so I have to confess to you, I was telling Joe earlier, I said, this was one of those Sundays, I don't know, because maybe it looks gloomy outside. I think for me, maybe because the subject matter, because I know anytime you talk about pain, you can pull back on people's pain and kind of draw it back up again. And the truth is, none of us really like to talk about pain, right? We like the good times. We don't want to talk about anything that's a struggle or difficult in our lives. And yet, as I told him, when I came here and all of a sudden I get to see you guys, and the first song as we began to sing, again, God just kind of lifts your spirits, and you realize, that sometimes you need to talk about some things, and it ends up being a good thing if you do, but it may be difficult as you jump in and take off on it. And this is one of those. But here's what I will start out by saying. If you can figure out, if you can understand the reason for your pain, it changes everything. It really does. Now, I'm not saying that all of your pain, everything that you go through, you will discover a reason for it. I'm not saying that. There's some things that you'll never know why this happened or why I went through this. Just the other day, I was looking down and I noticed that my little toe on this foot, the toenail is dark purple. And it reminded me of my pain because about a week ago, I'm walking by and there's a table there and I didn't have any shoes on, and what do you think I did? Yeah, I kicked the table. And of course, there was no one else around, so I said something like, I can even tell you, it wasn't that, I said, stupid table, right? Because, you're trying to say, what is the source of it's this table, and who put this table here? And why do the legs go out so far? And of course, then I, get a little more realistic, and I say something like, and how have I become this clumsy that there's a table there and I can't walk by it without kicking it and causing myself pain? Now, I'm not saying, listen, that you're gonna make some spiritual sense or some great, reasoning out of something like that, because I'm still struggling with it, as you can tell, All I know is that it hurt. But pain is a reality of our life. It is. And for the most part, like I said, we tend to just want to ignore it or act like it's not there. And we are drawn to messages, people who come and say, hey, do this and you will never experience any more pain in your life. Everything will go your way. Everything will be wonderful and perfect. And we're drawn to things like that. In fact, I told my wife I'm listening this morning, and these commercials come on some of the things I'm listening to. And these are not your normal TV commercials. These are ones that are real inexpensive in there. And so they're promising that if you will buy their product, you will never have pain ever again. It is one of those. And then as they're talking about it, they say, now, our claims are, you can't hold us accountable for our claims. We're not saying that it always works, but everybody who we've sold it to, that we have talked to, say, if you take this, you never experience any more pain. And I'm like, but it doesn't always. So what is it, Well, it doesn't work that way. Of course, you and I know. But they know that you and I are drawn to things like that. We want something that will fix all of our pains. We've been talking about Old Testament, Joseph, and this is the part of the formation of Israel, the nation of Israel in the Old Testament. And if you remember the story of Joseph, at 17 years old, he is what? He's betrayed by his brothers. He's sold into slavery. Does Joseph experience pain being betrayed and sold as a slave and then taken down to Egypt and sold to someone else? Does he experience pain? What do you think? Oh my goodness. maybe the worst kind of pain. And even as I say that, I know there's somebody here that you can probably say, well, listen, I can tell you of greater pain than that in my life, being betrayed by someone that I thought I should be able to trust, someone who's family, if you count on that, of course. And so we can relate to Joseph's pain. But the brothers, all the brothers that sold him, they'd gone through pain. Of course they had. Joseph was the favored son. Jacob treated Joseph different than the way he treated all of the other brothers. And it was noticeable. And Jacob, the father, did not mind letting you know that Joseph was special and you guys are just, well, you're just here, the rest of the brothers. Joseph it actually says this, Joseph's part of his job was to go check on them and come back and rat on his brothers. That was part of the job. That's what Jacob sent him out to do, because Jacob didn't trust any of his other sons. Were they experiencing pain? Of course they experienced pain. In fact, sometimes the way we do it, they use their pain as a justification for why they sold Jacob into slavery. See, we're justified. I'm feeling pain, I'm hurting, so it's okay for me to do what? Hurt someone else. You ever done that? Sure. Sometimes you just have a bad day. Sometimes it's just, things are going tough. We know better, but somehow we just sort of carry the attitude that other people should know that, they should just be able to tell that I'm having a tough day. And we sort of justify. Even Jacob, the father, had experienced pain. Not only did he inflict it upon his own sons, Jacob had gone through incredible pain in his life. And it's one of the reasons I love the Bible, is because the stories are just absolutely true. They just tell it as it really happened and as it really is, good, bad, whatever. I mean, the painful part of Joseph's life is there also. He is the one who betrays his own brother. He steals the birthright from his brother. He steals the inheritance from his brother Esau. Because of it, he has to flee, because Esau is furious. And Jacob flees because he thinks Esau may kill me. He may take my own life. He goes off, he finds the most beautiful woman he's ever seen, Rachel. Her dad, Laban, is like, I want to marry Rachel. I mean, I've never seen anyone as beautiful as her. If I could just marry her, guess what? All my pain would go away, right? Anybody do that going into marriage? How long did it last, right? Then all of a sudden you gotta deal with the reality of it. But the reality of it was he cut a deal with Laban, her father, and you work for me 7 years, you labor for me 7 years. He did. He was very prosperous. He brought prosperity to Laban, and I will give you Rachel as my wife. Did Laban honestly do what he was supposed to do in the deal? No. In fact, it's one of the great things about Jacob's life. Jacob is a con. Jacob has learned to manipulate everything in life for his favor, even if it causes other people pain. And now all of a sudden he has met his match in Rachel's dad. And so he goes, and at the end of the wedding celebration, the next morning he wakes up, and it's not Rachel, it's her sister, right? The older sister that he could not get anyone to marry. So all of a sudden now Jacob has the wrong woman. And he goes back, he says, wait a minute, how could this, you've conned me, you've cheated me. And of course Laban's going like, yeah, you know one, don't you, right? Takes one to know one. And he has to work 7 more years for Rachel. So yeah, man, he knew pain. He knew struggle. In fact, you may not know this, but the book of Genesis has just great stories in it, so well worth reading. And Jacob at one point as he's fleeing, he knows that his brother Esau with all of his men and his prosperity is coming his way, and he is afraid there's about to be a conflict and a war, and he ends up in this time where he is actually, it says that he's wrestling with God. Now, is it an angel? Is it a manifestation? We don't really know. But there's this wrestling match that Jacob gets into with God, and all night he wrestles him. And this may sound really strange. In fact, when you read this story, you'll probably think, so you can beat God? Because it says that Jacob would not quit. He would not relent. He would not surrender. He kept wrestling and wrestling. And so the God or the angel that is representing God says, you win. What? You beat God? Not exactly. As far as a wrestling match, you won't quit. You won't give up. Okay, that was Jacob. So you know what he does? He changes the tactics. God or the angel of God just does this. And he touches his hip. And his hip goes out of joint. And it says that Jacob walks the rest of his life with a limp. In other words, okay, yeah, you won, you wouldn't quit. Well, you didn't really win, watch this. Yeah, because it's God. I mean, what are you going to do? And so Jacob loses the wrestling match in that sense. And yet he, would stubbornly not quit. So in doing that, Jacob's name is changed. And since then, we know the people of Israel by that name. Anybody know the name? Jacob just changed to what? Israel, yes. And Israel has a meaning to it. The name was given to him, and he's still called Jacob, but Israel becomes this name, and it can mean one of two things. So depending on who you read or how they're trying to interpret it, they say there's a struggle with what does this mean. It can mean one who struggles or wrestles or fights with God. That's what it can mean. And that would be very picturesque of the people of Israel. Always fighting with God, always struggling with God, even though they were the people that God himself chose. I think that's a wonderful picture because we understand it, right? We struggle with God. We fight with God. We're trying to overcome. We know what we want, and even if God doesn't want what we want to fight for what we want, and we end up in this battle with God. And is God going to reject us, walk away? That's part of the question. The name could also mean this. It could also mean God strengthens or God fights for. And it's always a debate. And in fact, I think it's a wonderful debate because in one sense, the people of Israel, just like those people, if you're a believer, you've decided to follow Jesus Christ, you understand this also. In one sense, you realize you struggle with God, you fight with God, life is difficult, there are things I don't like about life, I never liked pain, God, can't you just take it away? And at the same time, we recognize that God also is our strength. The way we get through it is because of him. See, if you're a person and you don't believe in God, and you say, how am I going to deal with pain? You know what you'll do? Just avoid it. Just find some solution for it. Just act as if it doesn't exist, or don't care about what pain you inflict on someone else, because there is no solution for it. But when God enters the picture, everything changes. Everything is different. And even much of the pain that we go through in life has a purpose in mind. There's a reason for it. Part of the struggle is part of our growth, part of our understanding, and part of our learning to trust God himself. That's Jacob's story. That's his father before him. That's his sons after him. That will be Joseph's story also, because Joseph is in this time where he now is, we're in the story, struggling with his own difficulty and with his own pain. Before we do that, I did put in your outline, I just thought, okay, let me give a couple of things about pain. Maybe you don't like these, maybe you disagree, you can send me others. So I thought about this. Here's one thing about pain. Pain gets our attention, doesn't it? I mean, if you're hurting, pain gets your attention. That's why you go to a doctor. Doctor, I am hurting, I remember, the guy that says, I went to the doctor, I said, whenever I lift my leg like this, it hurts. And the doctor said, well, don't do that. Okay, so that's not the solution I was looking for. Let's find a way to fix this pain. It gets our attention. It always does. It's why parents discipline their children. In other words, discipline just means, it's just a nicer word for it. They inflict pain. Of course they do. You do something wrong, and there will be a punishment for it in order to try to correct the behavior or to show you that this behavior is not exactly what your parents are interested in. And when your kids are little, they don't always understand why they're being disciplined, why this pain is being inflicted upon them. But you do it anyway because you still have to train them. I like the old story of the little girl that was in the back seat. She's jumping. Her mom keeps saying, sit down, sit down, sit down. She won't do it. Finally, she stops the car and she says, I said sit down. She sits down, right? And she says, I may be sitting on the outside, but I'm still jumping on the inside. Yes, in other words, I don't understand why I have to sit down. I don't want to sit down. I want to do what I want. Sure, pain is part of the process of learning and growing and being disciplined and being taught. Just also add to this, parents, the Bible also warns, though, about over-disciplining your children, about inflicting so much pain that they don't understand and they kind of feel like I can never do anything right. And it warns against this because you don't want to break the spirit of the child and you don't want to lead the child to rebellion. So pain gets our attention. Pain reminds us, I think this is important, that the world is broken. Yeah, the world around us is broken. And so the world around us is in pain. It will always be in pain. Despite the ads that I listened to this morning, they're not going to fix it. Pain will always be a part of our life. And we look for that day when it won't be anymore, right? In fact, I was telling someone this couple of weeks ago, they said, when will it ever go away? I said, oh, there's a day. There is. There's a day when God fixes it and God says there will be no more pain. You can go to the last chapter in the Bible, last chapter in Revelation. And Sandy Patty sang a song about this. Anybody remember Sandy Patty's song? No more night, no more pain, no more tears, never crying again. Because he comes and he fixes it. He brings a solution to our pain and our struggle at some point in our life. But only on his terms and only in his time does he do this, because God has a plan, and we're still in the part of the plan where we're having to learn from our pain, knowing that one day God is the one, he is the one who resolves all of our pain. I don't know if you know, in the book of Genesis, as a result of their sin, Adam and Eve's sin, God actually says the pain increases. Did you know that? It does. It says, for the woman, he says to Eve, he says, and I will sharpen or multiply your pain in childbirth. That's actually part of what it says. Genesis 3, you can go and read it. I think it's more than just childbirth, ladies, right? I think it also means, and your kids will really be trouble later on, right? You know, I think that the pain continues as you go. Of course it does, because you don't like to discipline your kids, and you don't like to see them in pain, and you don't like to take them through the things they have to go through. To Adam, he says, listen, you will have to scratch out a living from the ground, but it will be painful. Because the weeds, the thorns, and the thistles, they will outgrow the things that you want to eat, but you'll still have to do it. And he says, and you will do it all the days of your life until you return to the earth or to the ground from which you came. That's the famous verse about we came from dust, right? To dust we return. And actually, Adam's name is a form of the word for the ground. That's what he's named, yeah. So there's that struggle that we have, that we go through. We have to experience pain, but that pain has a purpose. It shows us the condition of the world. It gets our attention. The third thing is pain might point out even our own sin. Even the things that we refuse to acknowledge, that we know are wrong, but the pain causes us to stop and say, maybe I should change this. Maybe I shouldn't continue to do this, because it only makes it worse in life. It doesn't make it better in life. And it points out to us some changes that might need to come in us, in ourselves, that we would not recognize or we would not acknowledge if it weren't for the pain, right? Sure, that's a good part of what pain can do. Or number 4, but pain gives us a connection point with others. Yes, because everybody experiences pain. Everybody goes through similar struggles. I know that it looks like on Facebook or on Entertainment Tonight that there are people who go through no pain and they go through no struggles. It's not true. In fact, some of the people that you may think they have it all, they are privileged, a lot of times they go through more pain and more struggles than everyone else does. And one of the reasons is sometimes because they think they shouldn't go through any pain and struggles. And so when they hit them in their position, it's even worse, and it's devastating, because then what is the answer? If I can't fix this, if I can't do this, what is the answer? Jesus, he's confronted by a young man who's one of the guys that every mother would want their son to grow up to be. And he comes and he questions Jesus about a few things. And at one point, Jesus is actually, he's kind of talking to him, and he says, there's one thing that you lack. Because he says, I've done everything that I need to do. I've kept the law. He said, okay, there's one thing that you lack. Take everything that you own, sell it, give the money to the poor, and then come follow me. Whoa! You don't want to be privileged anymore, do you, right? You don't want to be the rich young man anymore. Do what? Give it all up. Sell it. Give it away. And come follow me. And then the story says that the man walked away because he was wealthy. He was rich. He had a lot of stuff. And the disciples then asked this question. Would you ask? I think I would ask this question. Wait a minute. If this guy can't do the right thing, if this guy can't figure it out, this is the guy our mom always said, why can't you be more like, right? I mean, if his life isn't enough, what hope is there for us? Yeah. And that's what happens to us in the world, is there's a certain pain when we recognize that, it doesn't work and you can't fix it. But it gives us this connection that all of us have with each other, because we all struggle with pain. That means you, in your pain, you have a chance to help someone else with theirs. And then I put a fifth one in here also, and that is that pain may drive us toward a greater goal. And we understand that because sometimes that the path to achievement or the path to a different place will involve pain in your life. You've ever had to move, just pick up, load up everything? Maybe you load up your family, maybe you were by yourself. It was painful to leave where you were, but you knew you had to go. I remember when I was I just finished college, and my dad sat down with me, and he understood what was going on because he'd been there before also. And I remember it was such a sad moment to me because my dad looked at me and he said, I know you have to leave. And I was sitting there thinking, no, I don't. I like it here. This is good. I know you have to leave. And he knew there was something in me that said, I've got to go. It's time for me to step out. I finished my school. I came back home, to drop off all the stuff I didn't want and leave it at the house. That's what kids do, right? Wait a minute, what about all this? Take that with you too. Well, I couldn't get it in the car. All I had was a two-door car, and so whatever I could get in the car, that was it, and I had to move with just that stuff. And at the same time, it was painful to leave because watching my parents and knowing that they were hurting with me leaving, and at the same time, it was exciting to leave, right? Because you're moving forward. You're trying to move toward a goal in life, something that inside you just know you were made for. You just know you need to do this. And I leave a colonial house, two-story colonial house on about an acre lot with a huge oversized swimming pool, diving board, all my stuff my parents had built. And I move into a upstairs part of a quadruplex little apartment that cost the three of us $75 a month. $25 each, that's all. So was it a dump? Oh yeah, of course it was. We called it the palace, but because for us, it was. We were out on our own, we $25 a month. Are you kidding? Yeah. Well, it had no air conditioning. It had a heater. It had, hot water. Yeah, I guess you could say that. I mean, it was, so it was a dump. Yeah, and it was, but it was our dump, right? And it was part of a new adventure, someplace that we were going. So here's Joseph. We're jumping back to his story. Joseph has become second in command to Pharaoh. I mean, he has taken them through the time of 7 years of just unbelievable harvest. He has stored away so much food, and now they're in this time of famine. And just as Joseph thinks everything is good, he's named his two kids, names that says, God is with me, he has prospered me. And one of the kids' names also means, and God has caused me to forget about my family. You know what that means? My pain, right? The betrayal. God has fixed it, only good times ahead. All the bad times and the sources of the bad times, he's taken those away. And then all of a sudden, if you were here last week, what happens? His family shows back up. Yeah, they come to Egypt because they're out of food. And Jacob says, hey, why are you just standing around? Go down to Egypt. I hear they have food down there. We'll starve. We'll all die if you don't do it. So what is it that drives them to Egypt? What is it? Pain. Of course it is. The pain of thinking we won't exist anymore. We will perish. Go down to Egypt. Well, they don't know who Joseph is. They don't recognize it because, as I said, Joseph now talks like an Egyptian. He walks like an Egyptian. So he doesn't look like them anymore. But Joseph recognizes them. And all of a sudden, Joseph's pain comes back. God, why? Why would you bring them back into my life? Well, think about it for a minute. Joseph is going to find out. What if God still isn't finished with them, just like he's not finished with you? What if God has plans? What if God can fix, he can repair, he can restore what we say can't be done? Not even God can fix this. What if he can? And if he can, and here's the thing. In fact, one of the ministers that mentored me for a long time, he would say this when I was in a situation like this. He'd say, what are you going to do? I don't know. He'd pray with me, go seek God and all. But he would say this. He would say, the one thing I can tell you about where you're headed and what you've got to do now is, he says, it will be painful. He would always say that. And I would think, well, that's encouraging, He was just being honest. He was being realistic. Because you've got your life set how you think it should be. You've kind of figured out, this is the life that I want. And all of a sudden, it's going to change again. And that's what Joseph is facing. I've got everything fixed. Everything is working out wonderfully until they showed up once again. And so his brothers show up. They buy food. If you know the story, Joseph sends them off. And as he sends them off, he does this strange thing. He decides to put them to a test. And Joseph takes their money and has his stewards put the money back into the grain bags that they had so that it would be like they're stealing from him. He's putting them to the test. And this is what it says. This is in chapter 42 of Genesis, if you have a Bible with you, but your outline, the notes are there also. This is what it says in verse number 19. If you really are honest men, this is Joseph speaking to his brother, choose one of your brothers to remain in prison, and the rest of you may go home with grain for your starving families. But you must bring your youngest brother, that was Benjamin. Benjamin did not come with them because Jacob was not going to let the youngest go. He'd already lost Joseph. He wasn't letting the youngest go. Bring your youngest brother back. This will prove to me that you are telling the what? Yeah, you are honest men. You say you're honest men. So prove to me that you're telling the truth. You say there's one brother left. Go get that brother and bring him back, and you will not die. To this they agreed. And then you jump down to verse 21. The next verse says, speaking among themselves, they said clearly, catch this, we are being what? Punished. We are in pain. We are going through this struggle because, here's this reason that they have realized, because of what we did to Joseph long ago. We saw his anguish. We saw his pain when he pleaded for his life, but we wouldn't listen. We didn't care about his pain. That's why we're in this trouble. And you look down to verse 25, it says, Joseph then ordered his servants to fill the men's sacks with grain, but he also gave secret instructions to return each brother's payments at the top of his sack. He also gave them supplies for their journey home. So the brothers loaded their donkeys with the grain, and they headed home. So as they're going, they find it. They go home anyway. And then at verse 35, it says, as they emptied their sacks, this is now their home in front of their father. As they emptied their sacks, there in each man's sack was a bag of money he had paid for the grain. The brothers and their father, Jacob himself now, it says the brothers and their fathers were what? They are really in pain now. Man, this is awful. How could this happen? They were terrified when they saw these bags of money. I bet Jacob even thought, yeah, you guys did it again, right? You've made my life even more painful and more difficult. But it says he exclaimed in verse 36, you are robbing me of my children. Joseph is gone. Simeon, he had to leave Simeon. They had to leave Simeon back with Joseph in Egypt. Simeon is gone. And now you want to take Benjamin too. Everything is going against me. You know what Jacob is saying? You guys, I was right to treat you poorly. You're just the source of my pain. How do you think this makes them feel? In this case, they had not actually done anything wrong. They're being tested by Joseph. But the conflict and the pain is enormous there with their father. It says down in verse 38, but Jacob replied, as they say, we got to take Benjamin. If we don't take Benjamin, Simeon's not coming back. And if we don't take Benjamin, we're not going to get any more food. So Jacob replied, my son will not go down with you. His brother Joseph is dead, and he is all I have left. If anything should happen to him on your journey, you would send this grieving, white-haired man to his grave. Wow, man. What a struggle that he is going through. But, of course, eventually they run out of food. Something has to be done. And Jacob's going to go through this struggle again, and it's a setup for Joseph to test his brothers even further, to put them further in a dilemma that he feels like they also put him in. So Jacob finally decides he's going to send Benjamin. You know, he's just going to lose them all because he has no other choice. And here in chapter 43, this is what it says. But the famine continued to ravage the land of Canaan. When the grain they had brought from Egypt was almost gone, Jacob said to his sons, go back and buy us a little more food. But Judah said, the man was serious, Dad, when he warned us. You won't see my face again unless your brother is with you. If you send Benjamin with us, we will go down and buy more food. But if you don't let Benjamin go, we won't go either. Remember, the man said, you won't see my face again unless your brother is with you. And then here's Jacob as he's moaning. And why were you so cruel to me? Why did you tell the man you had another brother? You know what he's saying? Why didn't you lie? Why did you tell him there was a younger brother? Why did you? And of course, you know, he wasn't there, but they were caught. Everything about them and everything about their relationship to their brother, Joseph already knew. And Joseph is doing, you know, what a man in his position would do. I'm not telling you everything that I know. I'm just testing you to see if you're going to be honest, if you're going to be true, because I already know the answers ahead of time. And they are absolutely just caught and trapped in this. They pack it all up. They go down to Egypt once again with Benjamin now this time. As they go back, here's what they do. I'll tell you the story because I'm going to jump through 2 chapters here real fast. They go down and they go to the steward who works for their brother Joseph. And they say to him, here's the money that was in our packs that we paid, and somehow it ended back in our grain packs, and we don't know how. We didn't do it. Here's the money. And the steward says this. It's really interesting. The steward says, I don't know what you're talking about. I know I received payment, so I have no idea what you're talking about. Of course, this is from Joseph's instructions to his steward. And so he prepares a banquet, and he says, you need to get ready and you need to get cleaned up because you're gonna dine with this man that works for the Pharaoh and runs everything. And they bring their brother Benjamin with them, and they come to this banquet, and some just incredible things happen at the banquet when Joseph comes out. They don't sit together because the Egyptians despised the Hebrews, and they despised shepherds. So they had to sit at a separate table. Joseph is seated at his own table with his own food, and he would have been given much more than anyone else. And then the other Egyptian officials sat at a different table because they didn't want to intermingle. But Joseph arranged it with his brothers, the seating order, in order from the oldest all the way down to the youngest. He calls it out, and they sit. And again, they're just kind of like, somebody knows, right? Somebody has information that, you ever felt like that before? Yeah, because listen, there is someone who knows. God himself knows. So there's no hiding from God. There's no way that we can lie to or trick or con God in a way that will overcome our pain and our struggle in life. No, absolutely not. So this truth gets thrown out at them again. coming through Joseph. They're lined up. When Joseph sees his brother Benjamin, it says that he leaves and he goes and he weeps and he cries, because Benjamin was the second child of Rachel. So this was his true brother, his only true brother. The others were half-brothers. And he weeps and he cries over him. He has to compose himself, clean himself back up, put back on his Egyptian makeup or whatever he does, and come back out once again. And now he puts them to a second test. He's going to give them food again. He's going to give them everything that they need to go back. In fact, it says he loaded them down with as much as each brother could carry. And this time, he not only puts their money back in the packs, this time he takes his silver cup and he has his steward place it in the pack of, which brother you think? Benjamin. Go put it in Benjamin's pack. This actually is interesting. When the steward, when they go and they immediately catch them as they leave Egypt, and they say, why would you do this? Why would you steal from someone who's been kind to you? And they weren't after the money. They just said, the cup. Someone took his divining cup. In other words, the cup that Joseph would be able to interpret dreams from. Now, listen, this wasn't because necessarily Joseph did this, but this was Egyptian to do this. And he had the same instruments. And this cup would have been made out of silver, precious stones. It would have been very valuable, not just for its materials. It would have been valuable because of what the Egyptians believed you could do with this. With this cup, you could tell the future. You could predict things. And this is just how they saw life. So this cup had even more value than you might think, just because of how they would have viewed it. And sure enough, when they go through, the brothers say, listen, don't punish all of us, but whoever has the cup, we understand. So they go through, and who has the cup? Benjamin. Oh my goodness. What is going on now? And they really believe God is after them now, that God is punishing them for all the wrong that they have done, for the things that they did to Joseph, how they mistreated Joseph. So they have to go back and they have to deal with their father, once again now that Benjamin is going to be taken, and Benjamin may never return. And so if you go all the way down to chapter 44, it says this, and now, my Lord, I cannot go back to my father. This is Judah actually speaking for the brothers to Joseph. I cannot go back to my father without the boy. Our father's life is bound up in the boy's life. In other words, if you take him as your slave, our father will perish. If he sees that boy is not with us, our father will die. We, your servants, will indeed be responsible for sending that grieving, white-haired man to his grave. They're taking ownership of it. It would be on us. We would be the ones, because we're the ones that talked him into sending Benjamin with us. Verse 32 says, my Lord, I guaranteed to my father that I would take care of the boy. I told him, if I don't bring him back to you, I will bear the blame forever. This is Judah even taking it personally upon himself. He says in verse 33, so please, my Lord, let me stay here as your slave instead of the boy. And let the boy return with his brothers, go back to the father. For how can I return to my father if the boy is not with me? I couldn't bear to see the anguish this would cause my father. Wow. There's a huge change that has occurred, especially with Judah, but all the brothers. In this sense of taking ownership, saying, yes, I failed. A lot of the things that have gone wrong, a lot of the pain I felt is because of what we have done. But they're not only taking ownership, they're taking responsibility for the father. They're taking responsibility for Benjamin. They're understanding there's something bigger about grasping the truth because of their pain, yes, but still grasping the truth despite the pain. Not trying to con, not trying to lie, not trying to get out of it in this way. There is a truth that they had to embrace, that God is setting them up for his rescue. And I put in here just a sixth point at the end of this in your outline. God used pain in their case. He used this pain to rescue a family from self-destruction, because that's what they were doing. They were destructing as a family because of all the bitterness, all the anger, because of all the struggles that they were going through. And at some point, God has brought them to this facing themselves as they really are, taking their own sins, their own faults, their own pain, and standing before God and just being straight up and just honest about it. Now, the reason I think this is such a big deal is because I think that that's what God does with us. In fact, I know that's what the gospel is all about Jesus Christ coming and taking on our pain, becoming people like us so that we would understand He knows what we go through. He sees everything. There's nothing that is hidden from Him. And He doesn't come and take on that position so that He can do us in. He doesn't come so that He can inflict more pain upon us. He actually comes so that He can rescue. But the only way that He can rescue is as we learn to be straight up with God and honest with God and take our pains and our struggles to God. One last place, and I know it's not in your outline. This is, if you have a Bible with you, this is in Philippians. Because Paul, who is very Jewish but became a believer following Jesus Christ, totally revolutionized his life. And Paul sees pain in an entirely different way after he becomes a follower of Jesus. He doesn't look at his life as someone as he did before, that it's my job to inflict pain on people. And he did it thinking I'm fixing them or I'm fixing culture by inflicting pain. Instead, he sees the pain that Jesus endured, and all of a sudden he decides, and I will endure pain for a greater cause. This is what he says. This is in chapter 1, verse number 12. He says, "Now I want you to know, brethren, that my circumstances have turned out for the greater progress of the gospel." That the gospel is the message about who Jesus is and what He came to do. He says, so that my imprisonment for the cause of Christ, and he was in prison at this time, has become well known throughout the whole Praetorian Guard and to everyone else. And here's part of the result. And he says, and that most of the brethren, trusting in the Lord because of my imprisonment, my pain, right? They have far more courage to speak the word of God without fear. Wow. He said, that's all, my pain, my struggles have resulted in their courage and their desire to look at me and see what I'm going through and say, you know what? We're going to speak the gospel, because that's why he was in prison, because he wouldn't stop proclaiming the gospel of Jesus Christ. In chapter number 2, he talks about, and so have the same attitude that Jesus had. He suffered. He went through pain. He became a human being, even though he didn't have to, became a human being for a reason, so that he could offer his life, go through everything that you went through, everything that I go through, not sin, and then offer his life in exchange for ours. Same thing that Judah is trying to do. Hey, don't take the boy, take me. Let me offer my life in exchange for his. And then in chapter 3 of Philippians, he goes on and he says, it's just that wonderful verse that we love, but it's all tied to the same idea. The whole book of Philippians, which is so encouraging and so positive. If you want to read a positive book, you should read just 4 chapters. So encouraging. So he says this. He says, so this one thing that I do, then he names 2. This one thing that I do, that's the way you're supposed to do. This one thing that I do, he says, forgetting what lies what? Behind me, and pressing on to what is ahead. I'm going to move on toward the goal. Right, because God has a goal. And all of a sudden, when you realize even your pain and your struggle is a part of this goal, what he's trying to do, now it changes. It's not just something you lament over and say, God, why do I go through pain? But all of a sudden you realize, at least with some of it, there's a reason for this. And it makes it not only bearable, it actually makes it energizing that I go through this because of what Christ himself did and because of what I can now do in response to him. Let's pray together. And maybe you're here, maybe you're going through pain. Maybe there's struggles that you have, or maybe you've just never really wrestled with the idea of what pain is all about and what pain might mean in your life. I would encourage you today, if you haven't done this, to take your pain to the cross. Take your pain to Jesus himself, who understands pain like no one else has ever understood pain. But Jesus sees pain as having a reason and a purpose behind it. Not that he can explain everything that you go through, but he certainly changes your attitude and your approach to the struggles of life. That there is a goal. There is a place that God is taking us. And that journey is not without its struggles and not without its difficulties. It will take faith to walk this journey. It will certainly take trust to walk this journey. A trust that God is true, that God is faithful, that God does not waste pain. Instead, God uses it for his own purposes, for his own reasons, to move us forward, to shape us and to make us more in the image of his Son, Jesus Christ. If you're a person here, maybe you've never put your hope and your trust in Jesus Christ. That's why he came. So that by believing in him and accepting the gift that he gives of his own life, your life would be different. You would not walk this life alone, but he would walk it with you. He promised he would give us his Spirit, and he does give us his Spirit, who then makes his word, the truth, come alive to us, and it changes everything. In fact, even Jesus said that truth that he teaches us is what sets us free. It gives us a whole new approach to life. So if you've never put your hope and your trust in Jesus Christ, you can say, Lord Jesus, thank you that you came, that you suffered. You became a man with all the ills and the struggles and the difficulties that we experience. You took them all upon yourself because of your love for us. And I thank you that you gave your life for me. Forgive me my sins. Show me a better way, Lord. Place your Spirit inside of me, a new life to lead me in a new way. In Jesus' name I pray. Amen.
We invite you to stand as we continue worship.